Buddy, I ain't taking the rap on this. I lock this place up every night. It's not my fault if every pervert, weirdo,
well, don't talk to
horny...
me. Go talk to someone in charge. I'm busy.
Buddy.
Yeah?
Listen, it's not my fault if every horny kid and weirdo pervert comes in here. I lock this place up. I don't need this action.
Okay, don't talk to me. Talk to the sheriff.
Sheriff, hey.
Not now.
Travis Sheriff's Department.
Where's Ira?
Horace? What's going on out there?
There's a woman here. She said she's the Brady kid's mother. And I think she killed Don Robertson.
Slow down, Horace.
There's blood everywhere! Ah!
No vegetables, no dessert.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Bears Presents The Bear Cave of Terror. I'm your hairy, heavy homo and horror fan host, Steve Morey. Each week, here in the Bear Cave, I invite a horror-loving guest who brings with them one of their favorite scary movies. It can be classic, gory, trashy, obscure, well-known, filled with cats, or something probably still banned in Britain. In other words, a thrilling work of cinematic terror that we think that you might enjoy. In each episode, we'll dig into the flesh and bone of the film, highlighting our favorite scary moments, as well as stories and details from beyond the screen, all while our guest imparts their deep, and possibly concerning, love for this week's frightful vision unto you, our dear listener. And joining me once again in the Bear Cave is Mr. Ken Creamer. Mr. Ken! 67 of Stephen himself.
Pleasure to be back.
It's great to have you back. And so, of course, that means that we're probably talking about a Stephen King film. And which film is that this time?
What do you get when you cross a vampire incestuous love story and the need to travel from town to town looking for fresh virginal victims? You get Stephen King's Sleepwalkers. That's not your typical take on a vampire tale. I definitely think it would be considered a vampire tale, but it's definitely got its own imagery and uniqueness with the feline portion.
I agree. It does have more to do with like a vampire story than maybe a werewolf story. Essentially, you have were-cats, were-cat people here. But really, it is more of a vampire story because they're trying to ingest life force. They need a virgin to get that nummy life force in order to continue, which is similar to the 1985 film Life Force, where they, suck the life force because they're vampires.
Another great, almost vampire movie.
But this has a lot more kitty cat action than other vampire movies might. And actually, how about you give us the summary of what this movie is about besides kitty cat vampires?
Yeah, so basically the concept, it's a really neat concept, is that there's this race of creatures known as sleepwalkers who are, like you said, these shape-shifting, feline kind of looking creatures, but they're also more vampiric. They suck the life from virgins, and they're kind of unique in the way they do it too. In this particular case, it's a mother and son, and I believe they're the last of their kind, or the last that they're aware of. And so they're, traveling together from town to town looking for their victims. And basically the son hunts the victims and sucks the life force from them. And then he goes back and he shares it with his mother. And so there's this weird incestuous kind of vibe to it. They're lovers because they're the only two that are left of their kind. So they don't have a choice. And then he's feeding her, and it's just really bizarre. And so basically the story just takes us on their latest search for a victim in a small town, and there they find Popcorn Girl. She's the girl who works at the movie theater. She's sweet, she's young, she's innocent, and he starts the hunt for her. And of course, at first he comes across as a totally nice guy until he lets his guard drop and then goes for the snack, and then that's where the action begins.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and there are a couple pretty gruesome kills in this as well. They're not just hunting for the one virginal victim. There are some people who get in their way and pay the price because of it.
And what I always kind of thought was cool and unique about King's take on vampires, because he's done other vampires, Salem's Lot. You can see in the background Night Flyer. He's done
Flyer,
vampires. But the take on this one that I thought was cool is the way their powers work, like their shape-shifting ability, because they don't just go from like one form into an animal form. They can become older, they can become younger, they can change the way they look, they can cause illusions, they can hide, they can do glamours, they can change the appearance of their car, but they don't seem to have the ability to heal as much as like vampires from other stories. So they're a little more weaker to physical damage. And the really kind of unique part is, for some reason, cats do not like them. They're allergic to cats. Cats actually cause them pain and can hurt them and kill them, and cats are drawn to them. And so in the movie, you see the mother actually set up traps for the cats to come, and she's like, got another one, and that's actually kind of fun to watch. But yeah, so that's basically the concept. These vampire cat monsters hunting virgins and in the small town, and it goes awry. And I just love the fact that this movie does such a really good way of showing a unique take on a vampire, as well as all of the amazing cameos that they were able to manage to. They shoved so many cameos into such a small film that you're just like, oh wait, is that somebody famous? Oh yeah, that was somebody famous.
Well, and I think a lot of that had to do with not just the fact that Stephen King wrote the script for this, but also Mick Garris, who directed, is a huge horror fan himself. I was reading an interview with him that when he was a kid, he was a big comic book fan. He was a big horror fan. And so he grew up just loving the horror genre and has a lot of heroes who are fellow directors of horror films. And so when it came time to populate the film with extras, he decided to go and invite a lot of his horror director heroes. So not only do you have Stephen King, of course, making an appearance in his own movie, of course, but you also have Clive Barker shows up as, I think, a photographer or coroner's assistant, somebody with the CSI.
Yeah.
You have Joe Dante, you have John Landis, you have Toby Hooper. Like, they all just pop up as involved somehow in the investigation. If you're a fan, you'll notice them especially. And even Stephen King, his part's a little bit more juicy. He gets to whine and complain to like multiple people on screen, which is a lot of fun.
In the cemetery. And then you've also got, besides the director, you've got Mark Hamill makes an appearance, and then Ron Perlman makes an appearance. Mm-hmm. And I guess I didn't even mention it. The kind of cool thing about Sleepwalkers, it is as the only, clarification. A lot of times people say it's Stephen King's only directly written for the screenplay. It's not based off a short story. It's not based off of a book he wrote. He literally got the idea for it as a screenplay. But he actually had a screenplay he wrote 12 years before called The Shotgunners that he was working on getting made that just never actually went anywhere. So technically it's his second specific for the screenplay, but it's the only one that's ever actually been made. And it was kind of cool. I was telling you earlier about the idea, the way he got the idea for this movie and why it was a screenplay is he was at the movie theater with his family. And apparently his son Joe had a bit of a crush on the girl who sold popcorn at the movie theater for quite a while. Like, it had been something that had been going on for a while. They'd been teasing him at the house for like every weekend for going on for weeks. And so when he was there at the theater and he sees his son talking to the popcorn girl, which is kind of where he got the inspiration, he thought, what if, he's so smooth and he's charismatic. What if he was a really bad person and you couldn't tell and you didn't know that, and he really wanted to hurt this girl somehow? And so basically he was picturing his son as the villain of this movie, because that's kind of seen directly from the movie, and that's where the inspiration came from. And he said because he got the idea in a theater, he always wanted it to be a screenplay. And so I thought that was just kind of cool. That's kind of neat that he wanted to make a screenplay, and he did a pretty good job in my opinion.
I know he's attempted to do some other screen treatments before. We talked about Children of the Corn. Like, he had written an initial treatment for it, but unfortunately the studios were like, let's go in our own way. We'll have somebody else do it. So I think, in this case, and of course in Creepshow, when we talked about Creepshow, he was able to adapt some of his stories into part of the screenplay for that movie with the anthology. This is like the one where he can slap his name on it and say, "This is mine. I wrote this whole thing. Here you go." And he hired a great director, studio hired a great director to do it, who was not only involved in horror films, but also, was a huge fan of horror films. And so he knew what he liked.
So one thing that's kind of funny that this film gets a little bit of flack for is the sex scene between the mother and the son creature, because they're basically in their monster form doing it. But apparently that sex scene was actually Garris's idea. And
really,
that was all him. King's like, that was not anything that was in my original script. He added that. And they actually, it went on for so long, it was so in depth that they actually had to cut part of it out to avoid a potential X rating.
Yeah.
And that in Australia, there's actually another version of the movie to qualify for an M rating. They had to cut out a bunch of the gore and the sex scene in order to release it in Australia. So there's actually an entirely different version of the movie, missing all the fun stuff, in my opinion, that you can get in Australia. But I just thought that was so funny that Garris was like, you know what we need? We need monster cat people having sex. That's what this movie needs.
Of course. I mean, what could make this film better is by having a mom and son cat monster duo have sex with lots of purple light. And, story-wise, it makes sense because that's how he is feeding her. That's how he feeds her, like, the life force that he's taken up to that point from previous victims. But it is kind of, let's make this even more risque.
I just thought that King was like, that wasn't me.
I mean, you can tell the way that Garris, directed it and who he has in it. And in fact, even the reason why he cast Alex Kriga in the film was because when he was young and just started working in the movie industry, he was working PR. He was doing promotions for Universal, and he worked on 1981's Ghost Story with Alex Kriga, and was just such a huge fan of hers that he immediately thought about her when it came time to cast the mother. And so she was kind of like, well, this is a little bit more gory than I thought it would be. I wasn't sure I could do gore. Like, I've been doing lots of drama and lots of psychological kind of thriller stuff. And so, of course, when he throws her into the deep end, the first scenes that he shot with her were the scenes where she, is coming out of the house after slaughtering or attacking Popcorn Girl Machen Amek's family. She encounters Ron Perlman as a state trooper, and she bites off his fingers, like, oh, bloody, gory, gross, whatever. Apparently, she had so much fun filming that scene that she watched the dailies back, and she was like, I never watched dailies, but I definitely watched those. So clearly she got into the fun. She understood the assignment, and I think was pretty happy.
I love the fact that she got into it so much, especially with one of my favorite kills of any movie that ever exists is in this movie. The cop on the cob. Where basically there's a cop there. She comes up with a corn cob and just right in his back and stabs him with the corn cob. So cop on a cob. I just love that. Just cracks me up. I'm just like, it's campy, but it's also gory and horrific at the same time. I love it.
I mean, it's got to be a callback to Children of the Corn. I mean, of course, somebody's got to kill somebody with corn in one of these Stephen King movies. And
it's a King requirement.
Yes. There's got to be corn. Somebody's got to meet their end with it. It's like she who walks behind a cop, I guess.
Other thing that I really, really love about this movie, because it's kind of fun little, the 80s and 90s were a weird time in Hollywood, apparently. Lyman Ward and Cindy Pickett, they played the mother and father, Helen and Donald Robertson. And the thing is, they're actually married. They were married in real life at that point in time. But they're also the parents from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Right. They are the same people, which is like, how?
So I mean, technically, maybe Ferris Bueller is her brother that, he wound up actually being sick after all. Poor Ferris passed away.
He passed out at 31 Flavors and never woke up. I mean, that would be the Stephen King version of Ferris Bueller, I would assume.
So apparently, if you needed a go-to parent set, they were the ones in the 90s and 80s to go to.
Well, and this one, too, it was much more of a physical role than Ferris Bueller's was. I mean, basically, The mother gets tossed out a window. Father gets rolled. It's a little bit more of a physical role in this one, being the parents of poor Tanya.
We didn't even really talk about the fact that Charles, the boy vampire creature, Brian Krause, I know him from Return to the Blue Lagoon and Charmed.
But yeah, Brian Krause. What's interesting in this is, of course, he's playing a teenager, so we don't really know exactly how old the character really is. Part of his hunting ritual, he goes to high school and, of course, gets close to the virginal victim that he's looking for. Part of his ruse, he has to attend class. And, of course, who's the teacher, the English teacher in class? It's the same actor who played Lotho from Beetlejuice and several other campy roles, like in Heathers. Takes a shine to little Brian Krause's character. Charles kind of reads a little too much into the subtext of Charles' story about Sleepwalkers that he's very clearly reading. It's like, oh, well, maybe this is like gay subtext. And so he confronts him later on and attempts to get a little frisky with Charles. And aside from that sexual assault, he does pay for it. Unfortunately, meets his end. It was wacky seeing him, too.
He loses an arm and a leg, technically. At least a hand. That was there again was a very gory scene where you can just the crunching and the bone and but very well done.
Yeah.
When you have a scene like that in a movie that you're just like, it's good. Brian Krause did a really great job in this. It was fun. It was a fun, kind of campy movie. Something that I never really was 100% sure on, and maybe you would know. So when they're doing the famous face morph scene, which we will be talking about with the special effects wise, and you see his face go through all the changes, he's the monster. He's his character as it is now. He has the face of a young boy at one point in time through all of the transition. In the very beginning of the movie, when they find that young girl's body in the closet, is she like supposed to be a really little girl? Like, does he change his age depending on where they're hunting? Because I swear one of the cops says, oh my God, it's just a little girl. And she still had like braces. So
Yeah.
I got the impression that she was younger than like a teenager. And then when it showed his face morphing into the younger boy's face, I'm wondering if like he changes his face to hunt different prey.
That would make sense. I took that because obviously Mark Hamill's cameo at that part as a cop finds the body in their previous house, and she's just a corpse. Everything's just dried out and desiccated, but you can see the braces. I kind of saw her as like maybe like a middle teenager, so maybe like 14 years old. But it would make sense because obviously Brian Krause, he may be playing a teenager, and we're talking like late 80s, early 90s movie teenager, which is probably like in their mid-20s
35,
anyway.
40,
Yeah, something like that. Like, 21 Jump Street, my God, those people did look like they were in their 20s. But, the age of the victim here probably would have been a little too weird. So it would make sense that if they did have that if they did show what he looked like then, it would probably look like a younger person rather than statutory rape age difference, because that would be a little too much.
Yeah.
But it would make sense. And that, and I think even like morphs into a baby at that point too. So like you see him as a young boy, you see him as a baby, you see him as like a cat person, you see him all sorts of things. And in fact, because we brought it up, we might as well talk about it. One of the big special effects in this movie, and this came out in 1992. So it's right after, and right at the first wave of big CGI in the 90s. Because at the beginning of the 90s, CGI became the holy grail for special effects. And you had, you had The Abyss in like 1989, but you also had Terminator 2 in 1991. Lawnmower Man was happening at about this time as well. And then, of course, in 1993, Jurassic Park. And in between that, there was one big technology that kind of was involved in Terminator 2, but was really big with Michael Jackson's Black or White music video. And that was morphing, where you actually had the ability to take a person or a person's face in motion, like actually moving and doing things, and morph it into another person's face and then match up the movement and everything. And this was huge. And of course, movie studios want to use it. And this is a perfect example of getting to use that very early on, because I think Black or White came out in 91, late 91, and this movie came out in early 92. So you had not a lot of time. And it was the same studio. It was Apogee Studios that went ahead and did that too. And you have Charles transforming from normal human to sort of like partially transformed. So just sort of like scary teeth with cat nose, and then like full sleepwalker cat head, baby, young boy. And it's pretty cool for 1992. I mean, when we watch it now, that is the one thing to keep in mind when you're watching something now and you're like, okay, I'm used to Avatar and I'm used to, Lord of the Rings and Mando and all these heavy CGI shows and movies where they have millions upon millions of dollars to do that. Early on, it was crazy expensive. So the fact that they were able to afford it was great, and it looked good. Some other productions weren't as lucky.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was definitely one of the better scenes in the movie. I think a big portion of the special effects budget went to it, but that and the cat suits. But super, just got such a kick out of that and the Michael Jackson video. And at that point in time, I love that stuff. I was like, that's so cool. How did they do it? I watched that Michael Jackson video on repeat so many times. It's black, it's white. Crazy. I love that technology, and just the fact that it was in a horror movie, I just lost my stuff over. I was like, this is so cool.
When I was watching it when it came out, I saw it a few years later. I didn't see it in the theater, but I did see it on TV, and they did have that in, and it was just like, it was still at a time where it was really cool. It was really one of those things where you're like, this is good special effects. Obviously now, 30 years later, it has a different feel to it. But it's still, if you take it for what it was at the time, it was pretty cool. And like you mentioned, the cat suits, practical effects there. The suits were designed by Tony Gardner and Altea Studios. And the way that they did them is that they were full body suits, very similar to apparently what they did for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. But they actually had much thinner actors, other than Brian Krause and Alice Krige, to wear the suits during those scenes where you got to see the full body. And the reason they did that was because if it was like let's say an average size actor, they would just be way too bulky, because they had to keep it very compact. The way that these were full body suits with no clothes, no fur, no nothing, it would be very difficult to hide seams and wires otherwise. So they had to keep the person wearing it very slim so that they could do those elements, but like be able to hide them very effectively without bulking out the suit too much. And it looked pretty cool. I think that was a pretty good challenge. And they actually did name the actors in the Cinefantastique article I read. It looks like it was Mike McKay and Karen Sureckley. So I was like, oh, okay, well, give them some credit there. That's pretty cool, that they got to do all the body work. Because, of course, they would have been in that lovemaking scene.
Because if they wouldn't have used smaller, thinner, petite actor, it would have been like the Incredible Hulk cat. It just would have been like, no, totally makes sense. And then it's kind of cool part about it is if you ever saw the Tommyknockers miniseries that they did, aliens that you see in that, the suits that they used for those were actually designs that they didn't use for Sleepwalkers. They had gone a different way, and these were designs that originally were going to be used for Sleepwalkers for the cat monsters, and instead they just recycled into the aliens from the Tommyknockers.
Just keep that, keep it in the Stephen King family there. If you're gonna design something like that, find a project for it.
Well, with the way all of Stephen King stuff connects, they could be the same thing for all we know. Maybe the aliens from the Tommyknockers are the Sleepwalkers. I won't be a surprise.
We'll have to see how the Dark Tower series comes out. Maybe they will make that reference.
It could happen.
I wouldn't doubt that somebody is going to be like, hey, let's make that connection just for fun for the people who are watching it really closely.
After watching Welcome to Derry and seeing Dick Halloran being the breakout character, I would not be surprised if we don't see a prequel Shining series starring Chris Chalk. I think that would be awesome. So I love how they're interconnecting all of the Stephen King universe, because it really all is.
I guess they are priming us for Dark Tower, and not a crappy version like the movie. Well, I'm not going to say that the movie was crappy. It was fine, but it wasn't what Dark Tower should have been. So.
Right. The movie was its own thing. I just consider it's its own thing. Let's put it over there.
It has Idris Elba in it. It can't be all that bad.
Matthew McConaughey's not horrible, so.
But yeah, I think those suits were really cool. They had to do some other practical effects as well with the suits, because the actual cats, when they attack, because the Sleepwalkers are so allergic to them, when they get scratched or bit, it actually like immediately swells open and then smoke or fire comes out of it. So of course they were actually using smoke and fire effects with the suits. And so they had special flame retardant heads that they had with it. And then the suits were actually flammable and could burn up in those particular moments. And then, of course, the final, they had built fully mechanical figures to completely burn up and melt for the final death scene. So it was pretty cool. Like, I think they did a good job mixing CGI so that it wasn't excessive. They used the CGI pretty much just for the face, like morphing scene, and also for the car, because there was a scene where the blue Pontiac that he was driving morphed into a red convertible. And so that was, I guess, that, and like maybe the invisibility effects weren't just sort of like fade out in different film. It was actually like morphed into the background. But they didn't do that excessively, and they used a lot of practical effects too. So it was a good transitional movie, I think, at the time that it was made.
And that was always one thing about the car that I was also kind of confused on. I'm like, what is their power? Did he actually change the car? Did he make his car a convertible, or just make it look like a convertible? Is it an illusion, or did he really change matter? I mean, what are their powers? It's a little questionable, but still cool as hell to watch.
I want to say that it's just an illusion, that it's just a glamour, because it does change back. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think when they're not concentrating and when he's injured, like a lot of what he's done just kind of stops working. So I think like the car itself was always the blue car. And when it was invisible, like he would turn invisible, it'd be red, it'd be, all sorts of things. Again, they don't really explain the powers too much. And maybe that
could be for the better.
It kind of makes sense.
I can see it. I'll go with it. It's a movie.
It's a good way to use the effects. Let's just say, like, it's a good way to use the morphing effects other than just the face.
We've done all this talking and we haven't talked about the most important person or character in this movie. And that is Sparks the cat, who plays Clovis.
Our hero, Clovis.
Clovis is the hero. Without Clovis, this movie would be nothing. Clovis is the hero we all needed.
Clovis the cat is such a fun addition, because again, it's like, what sheriff's department has a department cat? And why would they have the cat do ride-alongs? Why is that? But you don't have to question it. You shouldn't question it, because Clovis is cool.
Or Clovis, the drug sniffing cat, I guess. I don't know.
Guess.
He was in the DARE program. I don't.
Clovis knows if you've been using, kids.
But yeah, I just loved Clovis. He was like the hero we all needed for this movie. So he winds up saving the day and gets a nice new home with the heroine.
It is definitely one of those things, especially in a movie where it opens up with corpses of cats hanging from trees in the opening scene where Mark Hamill's the cop and they're investigating the previous house that the Sleepwalkers were living at. There's just all these dead cats hanging all over the place. And it's like, I guess they didn't like cats was the little throwaway line, with Enya's music in the background, with all the horrible things that are presumably happening to the cats of the neighborhood that are converging on this house with the Sleepwalkers. It's good to see one of them actually get to be a badass and save the day, lead the other cats in revolt against them. It's really fun. And he even gets knocked around a bit too, but he's fine.
He comes back. He bounces back pretty quick. So you had mentioned Mark Hamill. Random fact. He recently was in the Long Walk movie. He was doing an interview, and apparently during the interview it came out he didn't even realize he was in this movie. He didn't realize he had been in a Stephen King movie prior to the Long Walk, because they were like, so this is your second King movie. And he's like, what? And they're like, you were in Sleepwalkers. He's like, I was? And so I'm like, that's just kind of hilarious. He didn't even realize he was in a Stephen King movie, because it's a cameo. I mean, it probably was a hour shoot for him, and then he was gone kind of deal. Like, so
doing a favor, for Mark, for Mick Garris. And he's been in 2 movies this year alone too. I mean, he was in The Long Walk, but he played the grandfather in Life of Chuck, which also great movie.
Okay, so he's been in 3 Stephen King movies then. Okay.
2 in the same year, which again is kind of funny that he's playing relatively important parts in two separate Stephen King movies that come out in the same year. I did not see him in Running Man. He didn't appear in Running Man or The Monkey. He wasn't in all of them, just half of the Stephen King movies.
Half of the
that came
Stephen
out in
King movies for
2025.
the year he was in it. I like that. 50%. That's a good ratio. That's about the right ratio to Mark Hamill to Stephen King I like.
50%. That's funny. I can imagine with this movie too, I think it flies under the radar a lot of times. I think people tend to forget that it's a Stephen King movie. Aside from the title, Stephen King's Sleepwalkers, when people are thinking about King movies, especially after the huge run in like the late 70s and 80s, the 90s gets a little fuzzy. And that's when, of course, the focus goes on those miniseries, which are really amazing. And they might forget this movie. But also because I think around the same time, Lawnmower Man came out, and that was one that King very loudly disowned.
Well, and in that magazine that I had found that was talking about how he came up with the idea for Sleepwalkers, he was talking about how he hates the sequels like Children of the Corn 2 and Pet Sematary 2. But the studios won't make the movies unless you give them sequel rights. And so he didn't want to do it, but basically he had to do it if he wanted to get any of his movies made. And so he's not a big fan of those. And I'm like, I can see that. So yeah, I can kind of see he's a little frustrated with some of that, but he was not a fan of those sequels.
Well, but speaking of sequels, there was a podcast a couple of years ago, I guess back in 2020. It was an Ask Me Anything episode of Mick Garris's podcast with Joe Russo. And Joe was like, hey, is there ever talk about a sequel for Sleepwalkers? And apparently somebody pretty close to King wrote a treatment.
Tabitha King apparently wrote one, and apparently it was really good. And the whole concept was basically involving a girls' basketball team. I just always kind of, like I said, I imagine it kind of being like Jeepers Creepers 2, only it's a girls' basketball team on a bus that breaks down and they're being hunted by the sleepwalker creatures. I could see something like that. I'd watch that. Why did they not make this movie?
I don't know. The studios, obviously, this was not one of their prestige titles. This was not something that they, thought was going to be a franchise. They did give it a decent budget. It made money back. It was #1 the first week of release. So I think for a movie that could claim a sequel, this might be a good candidate at some point. But it has been over 30 years, so I guess they figure it's kind of dead. Joe Russo had mentioned, hey, maybe a reboot. They kind of toyed around with that back in 2019, but again, not too serious. This might be one where it's just, it stays where it is.
I could see it. Maybe they could do a series or something on Amazon Prime. I'd watch that. But I think also part of the reason I think this movie gets slept on, no pun intended, the name. I don't think a lot of people get the name Sleepwalkers, and then the poster just shows like a cat and a cat paw on it in the background. And so I think a lot of people were just like, what is it? What is it? I mean, there's no real clarification. So I think a lot of people just never gave it a chance. They might have been a vampire movie fan and just never even thought of it. So, I mean, if you've never seen it, I would highly recommend watching it, especially if you're a fan of a vampire genre.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of those things where I don't think it really hits a lot of people in their radar if they are vampire fans or fans of like similar things. If you are just reading the title, it doesn't say much. It doesn't imply skinwalkers, but they're also vampires. So it's kind of like if you're a fan of werewolf movies, or people wear something movies or vampire movies. I mean, this probably is right up your alley. Again, it doesn't hit as much. And I think maybe because there is no book, Stephen King didn't write a Sleepwalkers book that's out there that people can kind of find and then find the movie based on that.
You know what they need to do? They need to do a Sleepwalkers comic book, a short run Sleepwalkers comic book, and get some interest in it. I bet you that would work really well.
Probably. Look at Creepshow now. I mean, it is a hugely successful comic book series.
For sure.
And a TV series. So it was a TV series. The comic series is still ongoing. They just had another, I guess it's a Christmas special issue. It's definitely something that we know has worked for other properties. So maybe.
Well, we definitely know that there's interest in Stephen King's series because obviously Welcome to Derry, knocked it out of the park. So, I mean, I really, really hope that they keep going with it because I'm enjoying all of the King stuff going on right now for sure.
It's a good time, I think, for being a Stephen King fan. You're getting a lot of new properties, getting a lot of stuff that's brand new, but then also at the same time, interpretations of older properties that are being refreshed with new material and new directions, and but in a good way, and not like straight to video Children of a Corn 666 kind of way.
I mean, yeah, like the new Carrie series is coming out. I think Matthew Lillard, I think, is in that. So that's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I've heard good things about that from people who have in the know. So I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a really good series. It is definitely a good time to be a King fan. He's had a bit of a resurgence in the later years, it seems.
He has. I mean, 2025 was a huge year, obviously. Even before that, you've got the Castle Rock series, which I think is being re-released on Netflix now. I know it was originally a Hulu series, but I think it's going on to Netflix streaming now if you have that. And I think I've actually seen several articles talking about 11/22/63, which was another Hulu series dealing with time travel that Stephen King did, or based on a Stephen King book. That's now picking up some steam. I think people are seeing what is out there, and there's definitely a lot of prestige TV over the past 10 years that's been put out on some streaming services, but now is kind of making the rounds so that it can get a bigger audience. And Sleepwalkers, could be due for one of those, where if you're not going to reboot into a series or anything else, maybe pass it around to see on some of the bigger services, and maybe people might want to check it out if they haven't. Because again, at this point, over 30 years old, there's probably a lot of people out there who are completely unaware of this one.
It's definitely slept on, and it's a shame because it's a good one.
Well, I know, like when I first saw it, like I didn't really like it that much because I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting, I think, when I saw it. And it took multiple rewatchings for me to appreciate what it was. I mean, there were some cool effects as a kid, but it was just sort of like, incestuous cat people. It's unfortunate too, but critics at the time also kind of savaged it, and that I think probably killed a lot of the potential for cult appreciation for a while. I was reading like one of the Variety reviews for it, and they trashed it very quickly and loudly before it came out. They even said like, well, it's at least a little bit better than 1988's The Kiss. And I had to look that movie up because I was like, I don't recall that movie. And I guess it involves a cursed talisman or something, and a person who can turn their spirit into a panther. So again, more like Cat People, that movie. I think the original Cat People, not the Natasha Kinski one, but more of like the original Cat People. I don't really see that so much, but I think the original Cat People and Sleepwalkers, or maybe like the new Cat People and Sleepwalkers, might have a little bit more.
Cat People and Sleepwalkers maybe being closer together.
Because there's incest in that, and people turning into cats.
I could totally see those two being closer together than the other one.
Yeah, I like it's such a weird connection that Variety made, and I was like, I had to look this up because I'm like, I don't see that. But again, it didn't get the love when it came out. Like we had mentioned, it did make money. It wasn't a flop by any means, but kind of being in that middle ground, and then also being released close to something that was absolutely panned, Lawnmower Man being as really smashed as it was and did not make money back and was so disappointing. That failure overshadowed this movie.
Well, and in the article in the Fangoria that I was reading, he talks about he didn't even know the Lawnmower Man movie was coming out until like a couple of weeks before when he saw the movie poster. And he's like, what? And so that's literally the only movie he ever sued to have his name removed from. If you want to see a decent version of the Lawnmower Man, there is one on YouTube. It's one of the dollar babies that was made back in like the mid 80s, where he would sell his stories for like $1 to people to make that they just could be professionally sold. And apparently one of them made its way onto YouTube. It's only like maybe 8 minutes, if even that. It's just a quick little short, but it's actually closer to the actual story that King wrote than the Lawnmower Man movie.
So it's just basically some shirtless dude eating grass?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much, that's it.
Well, that sounds hot. For all you yard fetishists out there, there is a short film that's close to the Stephen King story. It is kind of too bad that this did get overshadowed a bit, and I think has lost out on a lot of like the cult reevaluation that a lot of these movies tend to get. But hopefully, it's going to get its due again, and who knows? Maybe they'll have a series. Maybe they'll go back to that Tabitha King treatment and finally get a sequel. But in that case, they got to bring back Clovis. They have to bring back Clovis.
Or his great-great-grandkitty.
Yeah, great-great-great-grandkitty at this point. I'm sure he's got many generations after him, being the big star he was. You've just listened to another episode of The Bear Cave of Terror, and if you haven't seen Stephen King's Sleepwalkers, or after listening to us, are struck with an irresistible compulsion to watch it again, it is streaming free on Tubi, and it's available to rent or purchase digitally and on physical media. And Ken, if listeners would like to get in touch, how would they do that?
I'm available 60 Seconds of Steven on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, everything, pretty much everything but X.
And you can also follow the Bear Cave of Terror on Blue Sky and Instagram at Bear Cave of Terror, or send an email to bearcaveofterror@gmail.com. A list of sources will be available in the show notes if you'd like to learn more about Sleepwalkers. And remember, if you've got gangs of stray cats clogging your neighborhood, be on the lookout for incestuous cat people. Good night, everyone.
Why are you being such a bitch?
Because I'm hungry.